Good morning, everybody. This is RVN Television. My name is Al Saide.
I'm Joe Osmendi.
And this
is CEO Chat.
Absolutely. It's the CEO Chat program we
Yes,
look
it is.
forward to every week.
Yes.
Every week we get to make a new friend. And Fred Saide is going to be your new best friend forever.
Okay.
We just found your new BFF.
My new
And the reason why is because we have exactly, personally, the issues facing us that you help people with.
That's right.
And so Fred Saide, you are the founder, managing partner of Money Matters USA.
That's right.
And your focus in your practice is on making sure people don't run out of money.
That's right.
And which Joe is running headlong into, even as we speak.
Oblivion.
God knows. And especially now that they've raised the cost of cocktails. I mean, you're getting there even faster.
Well, that's
So-
spending discipline.
So I mean, what we've just done, that's spending discipline. And there's more to it than that. But what I think we've just done is made a connection with everybody watching the program. And when we talked a little bit before the program, it's an issue that you really start paying attention to in your 60s and 70s.
Oh, yeah.
But if you spend a little bit of time in your 40s and 50s, you could be in much better shape. Now let's talk about your process and how you work with people to make sure that they get that lift they need to take off when they need to take off.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here.
our pleasure.
I appreciate that. You know, everybody is going to tell you that they have an advisor, their relative, friend, schoolmate, member of the family, whatever. Or they say they don't, they do it themselves. It doesn't really matter. The question really is, how do they approach the problem? And the analogy that I always use is a football game. Most people are looking at running up the score in the first half. That's the accumulation half. Then you got to go off. You got to go to the locker room. You got to come back and play the second half. You have to win in the second half, and that's me. I play in the second half. I am concerned about what are your assets. Will the assets last for you? And if you have a spouse or a committed relationship, will it last over 2 lifetimes? And do you want to leave a legacy, charity, family? That's up to you. But you have to win the second half to win the game. And that's the half that I play in. Well, the rules are very different in that second half than they were in the first half. Actually, the rules in the first half aren't as complicated because you're just trying to run up the score. You're trying to keep on scoring, build that pile as high as you possibly can. And when you get to the second half, all of a sudden the rules change. You have to be concerned about your longevity. Longevity is a force multiplier. You can think of it as coal being pressed into a diamond, because the longer you live, the longer your assets have to live, the more income has to be provided. You're going to have health issues that you wouldn't have had 10, 20, 30 years ago, where life expectancy and longevity was so much shorter. So we like to do a longevity analysis. We use a number of different sources, but we like the Society of Actuaries calculator. We think it's the most accurate. Anybody who's watching us can go to a search engine search and send SOA, Society of Actuaries Longevity Calculator, put their stuff in and do the calculation. It'll give you a pretty good expectation, and especially if you're married, you have to look at joint life expectancy. So it's not impossible or not unreasonable to expect that somebody's going to get out to 90, 95. Now, people start with the so-called 4% rule. Bill Bengen's 4% rule, created in 1994. There's a problem with that. It was designed for 50-50 portfolio. It doesn't care about ups or downs in the market. It doesn't care about taxes. Doesn't care about longevity. Has about a 98% effectiveness rate here in the United States, and it only works on that portfolio, and you have to have 5-year treasuries in there. If you go internationally, it works about 65 to 68% of the time, in part because you don't have the 5-year treasury. But things in a perfect world, great. But it was not designed for today's longevity, where you have to think about a 20, 30, 40-year longevity. So we have to look at longevity, we have to look at volatility of the markets, We don't think that the S&P is a good benchmark for an older person because of that volatility, that up and down, which can destroy the spending that's necessary. There will be unexpected spending shocks. Where's that money going to come from?
Right.
In fact, we just put on a new client who listened to our radio program when we were doing a radio show. Took our information, but didn't call us at that time. Worked with somebody else who did a conversion from a 401k into an IRA. He's 55 years of age and retired, so he could move that money without any tax penalty. The problem is this person had a liquidity shock, a liquidity event, and he needed to go into the IRA. Boom! That rang the IRS bell, and he had a massive penalty to pay. So he pulled his Rolodex or whatever he used. There was my information that he had copied down, and he's become a new client. We've had to undo some very serious problems, and some problems we can do over a period of time because of the tax consequences that are involved in making those adjustments. But there are other considerations. It's which theory of investing or combination theories of investing. And at the end of the day, I like to quote Pogo, we have met the enemy and he is us. and we behaviorally, we're our own worst enemies.
We're the people, that's what we need to adjust.
That is very difficult, which is why we do psychometric testing on all of our clients. We want to know what they will do under stress. We want to know what they're committed to, but how much internal stress can that client stand before they feel they have to do something? And doing something usually means selling out their positions. Usually if they need money, they sell out positions that have the most gain and have the largest amount of taxation. It may be capital gains, but it's still, it's low basis. So they usually wind up with the dogs that are hard to sell or have no liquidity.
Right.
And that defeats what they're attempting to do. Or they go to cash. Problem is, if you miss 4, 5, 6 of the best days of the market, that could be 60% of the gain on your portfolio.
Right.
The other point that I will make, and I think I didn't bring a calculator because I didn't know I was going to be doing math today.
I'm going to want to unpack for our audience what I hear you telling me, because there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Go on.
People don't understand the math of investing. In other words, let's say you invest, in a particular position. It doesn't matter. It could be your total portfolio. And let's say it's up 10%. And then the market has a drawdown, so you lose 5% of the value. And you get a statement from Larry Lucky, your favorite stockbroker or advisor, and Larry says, you know what, you got a 5% gain for the year and you ought to be happy with that. Now, you come to me and say, you know what, I'm not sure about this. Well, I'd like to get your second opinion. Fred, look at my things. What do you think? And I would say, Al, you had a 15% loss. You had no gain whatsoever. And you say to me, why? I said, well, because you need 15%.
Yeah, in order to function, you're losing money. You're not making enough money.
That's exactly right. You have to get back to par.
Oh, okay, now I want to unpack this because, first of all, you're a genius. So Fred Saide, PhD, macroeconomics, knows an awful lot.
Right.
I mean, it's obvious just listening to you. The average person you deal with doesn't even know where to begin. So the reason why they call you is because they need. First of all, you also mentioned you win in the second half of the game.
Right.
When you're talking to us, you're in the 2-minute warning.
The red zone, huh?
Yeah, we're in the red zone. So here we are in the red zone, a 2-minute warning, right? I mean, we're talking about that.
There you go.
There's a little bit of emotion involved in how to manage. I want to make sure I'm getting the most I possibly can from everything I've worked so hard to build up. I want to make sure I'm getting that.
Sure.
One possibility is that I open up an E-Trade account and play around myself, and I get that goofy little statement that says I earn 5%, which gives me a smile. But then I realize, wait a minute, that's about 20% less than I actually need to keep my house and do the things I do, and pay for drinks now that they've doubled. What I love about what you do, honestly, is that there are so many variables that need to be predicted about me, about my income and about my assets, but also about the world and what is going to happen.
Right.
And you have simulations that address all that.
Yeah, we do. We will look at not just Monte Carlo simulations because as we try to tell people, that's not real. Monte Carlo tells you a probability. In other words, if we do, in our software, we'll do 25,000 iterations per condition. Well, it tells you if you do enough iterations, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. What is that telling you in the real world?
What does that tell me in my life?
Yeah,
How do I run
if
my
I
life?
tell you you have a 53% chance of running out of money in 7 years, do you believe me or do you not believe me? You look at the software, and the software is telling you that. But you know, if we run another set of 25,000 iterations, maybe we come out with a 53% or 65% chance of not running out of money. What is that really telling you? What you really need to know, I think, and when we do this, but we really need to know is scenario planning, and I prefer scenario planning. In other words, we have inflation right now, and in my view, as a trained economist, I look at what the Fed is doing. I think the Fed is a step behind. I think that the inflation is not transitory. I think it's more permanent, and it's going to run for a while, and it's running hot. You know that just by going to the supermarket, filling your car with gasoline. You know that your prices have gone up, your dollar is buying less. So most recessions are caused by Federal Reserve policy because they come late to the game, and when they get to the party, they overreact.
They overcorrect.
Now, this may work in a textbook and in a classroom setting, but we're not in a textbook classroom setting. We're in the real world, and it's got to work in the real world. Most of the recessions are Fed caused, and that's really what the danger is. Now, I am concerned whether or not Chairman Powell will be reappointed. If we were talking a month ago, I'd say he had about a 95% chance of being reappointed. We're talking today, and I'm not so sure. I don't want to make a prediction because I may be wrong,
right.
but if I had to look at the legal book in Las Vegas, the odds are moving against him right now because somebody needs to be a political scapegoat, and he's a handy one to be blamed.
So now we're going to have to take a break, but I want to talk about that. That's yet another factor that needs to be considered in your long-range plan. And we're taking a break now on CEO Chat. We have more with Fred Saide coming up after this break, which includes a couple of videos explaining Money Matters USA. So
Thank you.
Roll the videos.
Yeah.
So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in a minute or two with more of Fred Saide.
We're back.
We are back with
Right.
more CEO Chat. My name is Alcini.
Joe Osmenda here, and
And we are talking with,
Fred Saide.
what a guy.
Yeah, you know, what's
And are
interesting,
you taking notes? Because you need to write this stuff down.
I have a photographic memory.
You don't need to
But,
take
but
notes.
you see what happens, I think what's very interesting is Fred, you were explaining things that the average person over 50, let's say, doesn't have any clue about.
That's true.
Right, and that's why you hear the E-Trade and the Vanguards and stuff like that, because they're
Yeah.
trying to do
They
do
tend to
that
think
thing
it's an
based
app.
based on their
Yeah.
on what they're doing. But they really need a professional like you to steer them in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
An app is not enough.
No, it's not. I mean, it's the water cooler, Chad. It's what my neighbor is doing. Everybody is different unless you were born as a fraternal twin. I mean, you have to look at the individual situation. And one of the biggest problems with these apps is that there's no human being involved to guide the person. They're based on historical data. Now, we for the last 12 years, we're living in a non-historical period. We have never had a situation where bonds have no value and where interest rates are being artificially suppressed by the Federal Reserve using reverse reverse purchase agreements. And the Fed can push down those rates, and it has done that even though it has printed enormous amounts of money and expanded the money supply, and it has encouraged banks not to lend. And so the circulation of money, its volatility, has been very low. So this is an enormous problem. You get a result, but the result is questionable. You have to look at this period separately from a historical period. Now, depending on which time period you want to use for your charting, you can get any result that you want. You can prove anything you want based on what you take as your baseline period. But if you break out the last 12 years, then that's the reality that we have to operate with. Most people ignore taxation. Taxation is not your friend. We have a very progressive tax system, and it's nonlinear. And that means that not just as your income goes up, it means that once you turn Social Security on, you have a second tax system that gets superimposed. And this is now called the tax bazooka. I didn't invent that term, but the 10% bracket becomes a 12 or 13% bracket. The 12% becomes a 15% bracket. 15 becomes a 17, the 22 becomes a 25, and so on. All these brackets increase. It's the old Willie Sutton argument. Why do they do it? Because most people are in the 10 to 22% bracket, and if you want to raise money, that's where you got to raise it. So one of the reasons that we urge people to defer Social Security is so we don't have to deal with the tax torpedo until it becomes necessary and they age into it. The other thing is we have a lot of flexibility up to age 72, which is when you have to start taking required minimum distributions.
Right.
Up until then, we have a lot of flexibility. So we'd like to work with people starting in their 40s, but we really want to get to them by between 50 and 72. Once they are over 72, it becomes much more complicated to get into the planning that's necessary. And if they are relying on these free calculators, well, free is exactly what it's worth, free.
Sure, it's free.
Yeah.
And that, see, I think, first of all, I want to make, because we just brought up the idea, the whole notion of who should call you. We're talking about heads of households, families, individuals generally are who you work with.
Yeah, and small business owners, solopreneurs, somebody selling their business, thinking about transitioning toward retirement, all have the same problem.
They all have these same basic issues. Which is how am I going to live past whatever it is I'm doing?
Yeah, I had a man call me not so long ago, a business owner. He called me up and said, you've been sending me one of your newsletters for 7 years. You're the only person that never called me or brought me.
Now I'm opening them.
Yeah, he said, I sold my business. I got $2.5 million. I have no income. I want to take you to breakfast. Let's talk.
Well,
and he
cool.
became a
and
client.
those are exactly the kind of people we want to hear from.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they have some assets you can plan with.
Yes.
And because they have some choices they can make that make everything fit.
Yeah.
And something else, macroeconomics. Yeah, I know how much money I can get from Social Security, and yeah, I have a pretty good idea what kind of taxes I'm paying. I get all that. I can get all that for free in an app, calculating all that out. But you mentioned there's a good likelihood that we're going to get a different Fed chair in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
That changes policy. Those policies affect interest rates.
Yes.
Those interest rates are part of the cost model I need to consider. I can't do that in an app. I need you to help me with that. What if inflation is going to be 12 or 13% for the next 5 years?
It could be. You never know. It's running very hot, and I hate to say this, but it's true. The viewers can check this out for themselves. The Federal Reserve, even though part of its mandate is stable prices to control inflation and deflation, it has no workable model on inflation. I will repeat that. It has no model to work with on inflation. It used a model by the New York Fed. It stopped using that model 2 months ago because it was too inaccurate. It's relying on a model from the Atlanta Fed right now. But even that is flawed. So we have a Federal Reserve that has an obligation, a legal obligation to control inflation, and has no model. It's guessing. That's what it is. It is a guess all the time. They're terribly afraid of deflation, but they have no idea how to deal with inflation except by causing a recession. That's their solution.
That's probably the only way, is just to kick the economy into a lower gear and then hope for the best. Because we've been, listen, Joe and I are old enough to remember Caesar's tax on Mary and Joseph. More recently, though.
Did you sell the hay?
We're also old enough to remember Jimmy Carter and 12 and 13% interest rates and the kind of inflation that we dealt with in the late Nixon, Jerry Ford years. And that was structural and extremely persistent.
Yeah, very, very hard to squash that out until Paul Volcker, to protect his reputation, got it down to 3%. And we said, wow, hallelujah. Got to remember, during the Eisenhower years, inflation was 1%.
Yeah, right.
I mean, and growth of the economy was 3%. We were in Fat City and happy. Now, it is, if we have inflation at 5, 6, 7, 8%, with an economy that might be growing at 3 at best,
seriously,
2, it might even be worse because we have all these structural imbalances in the economy right now.
And we're also living in a world where, in my opinion anyway, politicians are less stewards of the economy and more experimentalists. Let's try this. Let's try that. And there is very little foresight or planning put into a lot of the policies they put in place. We have to live with those sometimes for decades.
That is true. It's crisis. It's management by crisis. The other thing I wanted to say is that for people who rely on these free calculators, they're really looking at what's called the classical order of distribution, which merely means that you're spending down your brokerage account to zero, you're spending down your tax deferred accounts to zero, you're holding on to your Roth accounts if you have them with dear life. You're not one, and then you're also using Social Security, which causes this massive tax issue that I alluded to earlier. And that will cause you to run out of money quicker. Some people say, okay, I'm not going to do anything. I'll just take money based on required minimum distributions. Problem with that is that you'll take out less money than you really need to live on, and you're going to wind up with a much larger legacy than you intend to leave. So that really, that's a crutch, and better planning will give you a much better.
Will give you a better balance of all those elements, which is really what you're looking for. Okay, so there was one other element you mentioned before the program that we really haven't had a chance to explore, and before the end of the program, I want to make sure we get there.
Sure.
Some people are stocks, some people are bonds. There's a psychology and a behavioral component to a lot of this.
Yes,
I want to make the point that your clients, you are not a one-size-fits-all.
No.
Every one of your clients has a bespoke plan tailored to them and to their particular feelings about risk. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And this is based on academic research and we give them a psychometric testing so we can understand what their tendencies are, how much risk are they willing to take, how much loss are they willing to experience, and at what point does the internal psychology, their internal aggravation, the angst, get so great that they have to do something. We need to know all of that in order to help them construct an income plan and an asset growth plan. Again, textbook says that the longer you have assets in the market, the less risk you have. But nobody who's 90 years old is going to have 100% of their assets in equities. Works as in the textbook, doesn't work in real life. So we have to have some kind of balance where you have enough income, inflation adjusted, for you, for your spouse, or your committed relationship, whatever it might be, and leave a legacy. Your first legacy is to your spouse. That's the first person that you have to think about. And with joint life expectancies, you can get to 94, 95 today. There's about a 26% chance that one of you will live that long. So that's why I say it's a 40-year period. And then we have to deal with the issue of frailty, your health situation, the need for long-term care, how it's going to be paid for, and how we're going to deal with the expenses of a final illness. Well, and if you're living in a home, you're going to have liquidity events. You need new plumbing, you need a new roof, the air conditioning, the furnace goes out, all the things that...
If you own or rent, there's a difference. And
absolutely.
And, hey, listen, predicting the value of real estate in the 21st century, I don't think anybody really is prepared to.
That is a great point, because when you buy a house, you're 100% in the house. You didn't buy an index. You didn't buy an index of housing throughout the United States. You're 100%
That's that house on that block.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
So people don't understand the value of housing wealth. How do you effectively use housing wealth? Because the single most expensive purchase that people are going to make is the investment in their retirement.
Right.
The second most important investment is the investment in their house. And once you get that clear, then you have to say, how do I unlock the capital that's in my house? Because dormant equity earns zero.
Yeah. Well, we're at that part of our program where you get to tell everybody how to reach you, and if they're paying any attention at all, they ought to drop everything and give you a call. So look in your camera and tell them all how to get a hold of Fred Saide.
Yeah, you can call me directly at 908-791-3831. My extension is 1. I'd be happy to take your call. If I can't, leave your information and I will call you back. You can also email me at Fred S at moneymattersusa.guru, G-U-R-U.
Well, you want to call Fred because Fred can tell you things your E-Trade dashboard will never be able to tell you. And if you think all you need to do to manage your money, especially as you get older, is just download an app and push a few buttons, you've really miscalculated. You need a co-pilot. And Fred, it's good that everybody has you around it. I had an uncle once who told me to listen to him. He'd love to go to Atlantic City, and he made so much money in Atlantic City. He made the craps table sound like an investment opportunity. So what you're hearing from your friends has bias in it. What you're seeing on television has bias in it. You need somebody that can.
What I like about that is your approach is totally scientific. It's backed up by facts.
Yeah.
And emotion and stuff. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
because
isn't that
a
refreshing?
lot of these things are just on emotional or hunches and stuff like that, and that's not going to get you anywhere.
No, and unfortunately the regulators have blurred the lines between stockbrokers and fiduciaries who are advisors. And there is a difference between the two of us. We have to act in the client's best interest, put their pocketbook ahead of ours. And even if it hurts, it hurts. But we have to do what's right. I got to treat you like you were a blood relative.
Right.
We got to go. Yeah. Fred, what a pleasure.
Same
really
here.
great having you
Thanks,
on
Fred.
the CEO Chat today.
Yeah, pleasure.
And thanks all of you for joining us today, and hopefully you've learned a few things, and definitely you want to give this guy a call. So see you again next week for another CEO Chat.
Yep. Take care. Have a good weekend.